Welcome to Talk Art. I'm Sally Rain, and I'll be your host as we delve into the world of the artist and the art that's all around us. Talk Art is sponsored by the Silicon Valley Open Studios. During the first 3 weekends in May, hundreds of local artists open our studios to the public. For more information, you can go to the website svos.org. Our guest for Talk Art, Colleen Sulivan, is an experimental multidisciplinary artist who uses gestural line to create her beautiful abstract imagery. She will show us a printmaking process that begins with her drawings. So welcome, Colleen.
Nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you're welcome. So tell me a little bit about what you think it means to be an experimental artist. That's an interesting term.
I call myself an experimental artist because I use, in what I do, different processes. I'm not a multimedia artist, I'm an experimental artist.
Right.
I bring whatever materials I need to into the act of making a drawing. And I'll do whatever I can. I'll put different materials together that you wouldn't think. I'll put white paint on charcoal, which will make things dirty. I'll put watercolor and thick acrylic, oil sticks, anything that you would normally not think should go together. I'll put that together and I'll just see what happens. And so that's.
Do you start with an end in mind when you're doing this, or is it more of a process?
No, I start by putting lines on the paper. I'll very often have something I'm drawing, like I'll draw figures, and then I will put another mark on top of that. Then I'll pull in some paint. I'll smudge that with my hand. I'll put my hand marks, anything that it takes to express what I'm thinking or getting the meaning into what I need.
So where do you find your inspiration then for these images?
Most of my artwork starts with figure drawing, actually.
Oh.
Not all of it, but very often I do, on an ongoing basis, I do a model drawing class, although that is sort of deceptive because it was started by Edward Stanton, and he called it the drawing circus. And
interesting.
that is a very interesting
Not what I think of when I think of model drawing.
It's a bit like a circus. Sometimes we would have acrobats. He would hire acrobats. They would wear theatrical gear, masks. Sometimes you couldn't even see the face. They might be dressed. I remember one time there was a pile of leaves in the middle of the floor and the model was in the leaves. And the model moves all the time.
Oh, interesting. So it's movement based. So
That's
the gesture that you use is based on the movement. Oh, very interesting.
That's right. So
cool.
Everything is fast.
So you brought some images for us to take a look at.
I did.
These gestural drawings.
I did.
So let's take a look at those now.
All right. This is a figure that I drew in one of these drawing circus classes. You can see that I've used lots of different materials here. I've used graphite, charcoal, I've smudged, I've used a waxy kind of crayon, watercolor, ink, anything it takes. And the marks are not meant to describe the figure. They're meant to put the figure in a kind of a context of what I was thinking, frankly. This is another model drawing class, drawing circus drawing. And in this case, you almost might think that there's a possibility of two figures being in that picture.
Or a shadow of the one in the front.
But very rarely do we have two models. In this case, there was only one model, and I just felt like I would I needed some more black in there. I needed to balance the composition. I needed to, it felt like it was becoming two people. And I used colored inks in this case. I used graphite, water-soluble graphite. And that's what I ended up with. Now this, you could hardly even tell this is a figure. It's more of a balanced composition. The figure really disappeared into this composition. In fact, you might even think there was a head at the top and a head at the bottom. So frankly, it really isn't a figure anymore. It's an abstract kind of representation of what I was feeling, the large sweeps that I felt with my hands. You can see that
definitely captures the movement, though.
And this is, I guess this would be akin to a portrait, but an expressive, kind of emotional portrait. It's done with charcoal and graphite and colored Conte crayon. You can see that I've erased the features of the face. I haven't actually necessarily drawn them.
Oh, I see that, yes.
So what I've done is colored it all gray with a chamois, softened it all up, and then removed the parts that I thought would describe it. This is, again, a singular figure type gesture, character. I've used blue ink in this. I've captured the light. I think that's the thing that describes this drawing mostly. There's hardly a face there, and there's frankly hardly a figure. Now this is a combination of many different charcoal materials, yeah. Charcoal and colored Conte and oil sticks and graphite. The beauty of using some transparent materials and some opaque materials is you can cover over the ones that you don't like, and you can keep on building them and keep on changing the drawing till you get the image that you want.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Now these sculptures, they all originate from my drawings. You can see that they're almost line work themselves. So one day I just decided that I wanted to work more three-dimensionally. I took these wires and they are manifestations of the drawings that I've done. This again is the same thing. This was a figure that I drew.
Looks reminiscent of the blue one that you showed us.
It does a little bit, I guess, in the gray. I've used wire and celluclay here.
Very nice. So we're going to be moving on into printmaking. And you have a demonstration that you're going to show us, and you're going to show us some of your prints before that. But tell me a little bit about what types of prints you prefer to make and you're working on now.
Well, I'm not a traditional editioner. An edition in printmaking is that you produce multiples that look exactly the same. So I prefer a monotype process. Mm-hmm. And so you get one image from each time you print, and then you get ghosts of that same print through what is left over with the ink that's left on a monotype plate, for instance. You need a press, printing press, to work this, and I've done other processes, but this is the one that I've settled upon, I guess I would say.
Well, let's take a look at some of your prints, and then we'll move on to the demo.
Okay. So this is a monotype. So basically, a monotype starts with a plastic plate. So I've painted the blue or the green in the background, the turquoise, onto a monotype print, and then I've taken another plate and I've dry pointed onto that plate and printed that on top of the monotype. Now, dry point is a process whereby you scrape into the plastic plate, and I've done that as I do drawings with a very gestural line.
Is that where the black is?
That's right, the black is there. This is a monotype, and this is a monotype using the process that I'm going to demo for you, which is called a pronto plate lithography process. And it basically takes, you can take a photographic image and put it back into your prints and print them.
So that looks like your drawings.
It is, yes. It's my drawing blown up and reduced and changed.
Interesting.
And moved around and doubled up. And this is the same thing. The blue in the background is a process called shinkole. So that's like a Japanese rice paper that has been glued on top. And this is an entirely different process. In this case, this print is about 11 by 15. I began with two large prints that were 22 by 30. And I printed the light gray in the background as a deep black, and I hated it. And so I took the two large sheets, 22 by 30, and I cut them up into 8 little sheets. And this is one of the 8 sheets, and I made a series of them. And
oh, that's nice. So you have sort of a similar background, and then the details on top were different?
That's right. I layered it and printed more on top of that, and I stuck with it, and eventually I loved it. So
excellent.
This is one of a series of 5, and there's 3 that went in a different direction, and I put dry point on top of them. This is, again, a similar process. There's only 3 colors printed here, which is kind of interesting. You've got the black, the dark brown orange, and the light orange. And so this has only been through the press 3 times. It's a large print, 22 by 30, and this again is a drawing, or several drawings of mine that I've cut up and pasted or reproduced back into it.
Interesting.
Again, similar process. In this case, I layered the same drawing over and over and over again into the process by running it through the press many times.
Beautiful.
This is more of a tracing process. So you take a solid black plate and you ink it up with your black ink, and then you put a sheet of paper on top of it, and then you just press at certain points, and you can draw on, and then when you pull the paper up, you end up with the drawing.
Oh, interesting. Yes. Yeah, very different process.
And this is an interesting process, too. This process is one where I did a black background, and then I wiped out the whites.
So now you're going to show us your demonstration, so please.
Pronto plate lithography, and that's what it's often called. It's called other things as well. So
tell us about your tools.
So the tools I'm going to use, it's a very simple process, actually. I have here a container of water with a sponge. I have something called gum arabic, which is a binder for pigments, watercolor, for instance. But in this case, I'm just going to use it as a liquid. It's a sticky kind of liquid. This is the ink I'm going to print with. I'll show you that in a minute. This is a pronto plate for doing pronto plate lithography. It's just basically a plastic sheet. Now, what I'm going to do, I've chosen an image here. This is a photocopy. It's on photocopy paper. Now, you take this photocopy and you put it in a laser printer. It has to be a laser printer, and it has to be a black laser printer. The color is insignificant. Color laser doesn't matter. So this is, I take this image and I transfer it onto the pronto plate. And here, I've done this outside of the studio. This is the image on a pronto plate. Now, I'm going to...
So it was run through the laser printer that plastic sheet was.
And it's a simple process. You just put the plastic plate into your tray, and then it will photocopy straight onto it, and look exactly like that. Now, I'm going to put a little water to make the pronto plate stick to the table. and then I'll just make sure that that sits down quite a bit. Now the idea of this is that you put the gum arabic onto the plate, and the gum arabic sticks to the white areas. It leaves those areas open, and then when you roll your ink over, it doesn't stick to the toner. The toner rejects the gum arabic. When you roll your ink over the plate, the ink will stick to the black areas. So I'm going to put this. So people do this in different ways. I like to use my hand to make sure that I've covered the drawing completely.
And you use a glove, I see, as well.
I like to use gloves. It's kind of sticky. When you're a printmaker, you have to be careful to keep your process clean, because it's very easy to get ink all over the table and all over you and all over your hands. So eventually you're going to have to pick up this plate that's been inked and put it on the press, and you don't want ink on your press. So I wet the plate, and now I've got the gum arabic sticking to the open areas, and I've got the nothing sticking to the toner. Now I've squeezed out a little bit of red ink here.
What type of ink is that?
This is oil-based ink. There are many different, there's Charbonnel, Daniel Smith used to use, there's many different types. So basically I squeeze out the ink, then I roll it up. You make sure that you pick up the roller each time, and that you get a nice clean cover, and then you make sure that your plate is still wet so that the dry areas don't dry out, and you run this over the plate. And I'm not sure you can see it in the camera, but as you do this, the red ink starts to stick to the black toner. And then you want to put some more water so that you keep those white areas rejecting the red ink. So you keep on doing that and keep on doing that.
So the water does not wash the oil-based ink off?
It does not. It's oil and water, as they say. So then you make sure each time that you take a little bit more ink and you roll it up, and it's starting to get redder. You can see.
How many layers of ink do you usually put on?
I might do 3 or 4. I might do 3 or 4. And you can do this, you can roll this up. You can roll this up, print it, come back, roll it up again. As long as the plate does not dry out in between, you're good to keep on rolling it. So I'll do it one more time, a little bit of water. Squeeze it out, pick up the excess. And one more roll.
So what's going to show up on the paper that you print on when you put it in the press is bright red.
Bright red, exactly. The black toner does not actually print. Oh. The black toner just is a vehicle for accepting the red ink.